Everybody, and welcome to the Dublin Tech Talks podcast, The New Normal. Today we have Fin Goulding, who is founder of the Flow Academy. Fin has been named as one of the top global CIOs and CTOs year on year. He's currently focused on executive coaching through challenges of transformation and is co-author of Flow, a handbook for Changemakers and 12 steps to flow. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
How's everything?
Just getting used to this style of working on a daily basis. It's becoming very normal, as you say. So
yes, it's there's nothing new about it anymore. It's the day to day.
Exactly.
So I wanted to have a chat to you today, Fin, just around your kind of transformation program. You've mentioned on your LinkedIn and other your publication around Flow, around the change curve that people are going on at the moment. Do you want to give a bit of background about what is Flow, who you are, and kind of what that change curve is?
Yeah, okay. So as you said, I've been really in IT leadership for quite a long time. And like a lot of people, they're very much focused on IT agility and getting things done quickly and getting faster and faster and faster. At Paddy Power, we're doing multiple releases per day. I mean, you just could not wait to get software out or features and functionality. So a lot of companies do that. They get very focused on IT agility. But I became very interested in the business side because businesses seem to work at a different pace and sometimes can't cope with this world of IT, which is full of jargon, etc. So I started to create something that talked about how work flowed through an organization and getting the business much more involved in business agility. And from that, I've kind of looked at helping companies now in my own company through some consultancy work to get their businesses much more agile, much more connected to IT, and getting them to deliver much faster. But at the same time, that means becoming, really learning much more about how they function, how they think, and what they do, and seeing some wastage, shall we say, in getting things lined up for IT teams to deliver at pace. So I kind of think of it, the IT groups can be quite quick at delivering crap fast. So why is it crap? We need to look at this other end and say, right, let's try and get that straightened up and have valuable things go through to delivery.
Okay, and obviously businesses' needs from January, February have altered significantly to back end of March, April, May, June. You mentioned in the leadership change curve around, the processes and the effects this is having on businesses. And you mentioned as well around, in the last 48 hours from your first article around Airbnb, Virgin, Uber laying off thousands of staff, like there's so much cost rationalization going on.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on where businesses are? Obviously size will matter, more agile businesses can change quicker. Oil tankers take longer to turn. Where are people at the moment and around transformation, business-wise and program-wise? What effects has this taken?
Well, I think what we find in our organization, that's why I end up working with CEOs and leadership teams, different companies around the world, is really they've been trying to transform or doing transformation programs for some time and failing and really not understanding why they're not delivering. And they end up with very expensive consultants, spending millions and really not moving forward. And usually it's because they need to change, something's wrong, they're not gaining the kind of market share that they want, or they're being disrupted by smaller companies. So what I did in the leadership change curve diagram, which hopefully we'll be able to share with this for people to see, is that actually this COVID thing has been a massive disruption. It's kind of like, it's very obvious, it's put businesses off kilter. Whereas they were already being disrupted. These businesses were already trying to transform, but not doing it very well. And they had time. I think what we're seeing now is that they don't have time. Some of those companies, particularly in the sectors which are at most risk, are having to protect their cash. They're having to hunker down, until they can come back again. And we're seeing that in a number of areas. The unfortunate thing is that then has a knock-on effect to their ecosystem. So then there are other suppliers or organizations which are plugged in, which are no longer able to gain from their growth because their growth has gone away. So companies that are adjacent, they're also going to have the same problems. And you've probably seen some of that in the recruitment space, so.
Yeah, lots of changes have happened. Like you look at probably businesses that you would have felt were stable, and that old adage of you're only 2 months away from, from poverty. If you don't get paid after 3 months, you're in a different situation. I've seen that in a lot of businesses in the services. I wouldn't just take recruitment. In a lot of the services businesses where you're relying on the workflow to work, the payment models to work, and usually the businesses that are service based are the last to get paid or not paid at all. So the reliance on month invoicing is probably the biggest learning I think I personally, from talking to people, will take from that business, kind of the forecasting side of business, or even the continuity planning of a business, was nearly forgotten about. And that might come into a part of the difference between what your business agility to, IT agile. It's a different mindset that I think people forgot about.
Yeah, I think so. I think they traditionally underinvested in innovation, product development, new ideas, etc. Really exploited their current model as much as they can. Yeah. And when it becomes your only business, there's no other things you can do, then you're really under pressure. And you see that obviously some organizations are very much, they prime on one particular thing, but they're not looking to the future. They're not exploring, and what should I actually do? And they seem to have lost the ability to understand how to create new things. It tends to be very much off the back of what's existing. So we're seeing quite a lot of that. But there are winners and losers here, and there's quite a number of businesses that as you say, are under impact. And just we're doing all this online. The conferencing world was something that we did a lot of work there, and training and education, and in fact workshops. All that's gone away overnight. It's incredible. But there are other businesses which are going to do well out of this. So we'll see some of that as we go forward. The startups always move in here. This is where the ideas come from. And then the big boys buy the startups, and then we move on. And
would you say complacency would be a product of not being able to be agile in business, or because there's a lot of businesses that have failed, have a single product offering and not diversified? You take people who are focusing on restaurants, or people who are focused on travel, they haven't diversified what that product is. Would that be a mindset thing around agility, or was that just very comfortable in what they do?
I think it can be very comfortable. Sometimes they forget that they should be, as a leadership team, you should be spending half your time worried about the current business and half your time thinking about the new world, what could be new business opportunities, where they tend to be more looking at acquisition, etc. So you see a little bit of that. But complacency, no, I think what companies have got is as they grow very quickly and very big, they add in layers and layers of management, and that kind of slows things down, and leadership really gets in the way somewhat. So if you hear that expression, well, we need to get sign off, then your business is probably going to be in trouble, because that's in my opinion, it's a lot of bullshit jobs, a lot of bullshit work, and that comes from the fact that we're layering in all these people that are trying to slow things down. So I think that's how I really determine business agility, is to start free some of that stuff up and trust your people a little bit more, that they've got the sense to get things done. They're not going to rip you off. That's just crazy.
Yeah, that's the believe in your partner model, isn't it? It's the exactly. Trust your suppliers. Yeah. You talk in your leadership change curve, and a lot of businesses are on it at the moment, and I will share it, but for people who might be listening, it's an effectiveness over time curve, and it's very much a flow curve. So we're in, and we're probably moved away from the denial, cash protection side, and some people are through work reduction, asset fire sales, and other businesses are focused on the future. Where do you feel people are at the moment? Kind of how can people prepare nearly for the future?
Yeah, I think businesses are in different situations on the down curve. They're in different places. I think you're right. Some companies, I think, are still in denial because they've got cash, but it's burning away. The workforce reduction tends to be the thing that companies jump to quite quickly. And that worries me, because then people are assets, people have got skills, they're innovative, and that starts to create fear in your organization. So things slow down. So I think there are quite a few companies in that space. The asset fire sales, we see some of that where a business is diversified too much. So they're selling certain parts of their organization that's not core anymore. So we see that. We're also seeing some companies that are freeing up cash through workforce reduction, in like to be able to then go and be predatory and buy other organizations. So you'll see some of that. You'll see venture capital companies coming in as well. They realize that this could be a 1 or 2 year thing. So they'll invest in a company that's perhaps on the way down, buy it really cheap, got a great brand, and then tuck it away until they can regrow it again in a couple of years' time. So you'll see some of that. And so there's a lot of turmoil going on right now. And as I say, I think most companies are in different parts of the down curve.
And yeah, so turmoil, that's always a good area for people to either grow or freak out and leave. As a leader, I posted, I don't know if you read anything I post, but the Airbnb guy and the CEO there, you know, his letter to his employees was excellent. It's the compassion, the authenticity of what he was saying in that letter was great to see. But, you know, for a business that probably people thought was quite agile and, you know, good, it was probably, you know, overstocked with people. And, you know, how as a leadership team should they go about effectively looking at changing their business model or even changing internal habits?
Yeah, it's really hard when you've got a business model that's so determined on, you know, having people travel and people buy your services, and that's kind of where they've kind of got stuck in terms of, well, what could they move towards? Because I mean, as a business, we thought they were fantastic, as you say. I mean, their kind of ecosystem model where they've linked in other businesses is fantastic. And in fact, I saw that same workforce reduction, and I also saw people commenting from Airbnb saying, well, why didn't they keep us to try and invent that new thing? What is it that could change our business model into something that's more sustainable? What that would be, I don't know, but what we'll see is rising from the ashes, there'll be something. But right now, I think they're just very much in this sort of cash protection phase. I mean, I think people will go back to traveling at some point, and people will go back to, you know, having holidays, etc. So at least that's what they're hoping. What it'll look like, I don't know. It'll be a smaller model, I think.
And how should businesses then, like, if you're in a, you know, you're at the down curve and you're looking at something different, you know, how would you go about or suggest a business to look at their kind of business remodeling? What would be the kind of 4 or 5 main things you should focus on to be better?
So what we've done is we've helped a couple of companies in the past who've been suffering from massive disruption in their marketplace. And a lot of companies talk about customers, you know, putting the customer at the center of everything. That's kind of weasel words. You know, that's for us. You know, I don't think a lot of organizations really understand their customers or have even met their customers, probably only during some sort of bad phase rather than a good phase. But really getting to understand what success looks like for your customers is important. What do they want? What do they like, etc. We also find that companies have got assets that they're not using. They've built things, prototypes. They've got people with skills, or they've done research that they're not actually using. It's been thrown away. And we often find that we can actually bring those assets back out and allow them to start doing some small test and learn type stuff. You know, a startup, for instance, if they're going to build a product or service, don't actually build it. I mean, they might put out their web page that says, click on this if you're interested in buying this, and you put your email address in. And there's nothing behind it. It's just to see how many people would click on it. So if thousands of people click on that thing, I think we should go and build it, sort of thing. And large organizations don't do as much test and learn as they used to. They're very much into spending months and months and months and months creating something that they'll go and build, and therefore it could actually fail afterwards. So we try and get organizations to think about how they can do much more targeted innovation. And then we say to them, okay, are there businesses that you're connected to that you can jointly partner with to create a bigger ecosystem? So it's actually having that ability to work with others to kind of like spur yourself on. So that's what we try and get them to do. And we use this technique called the lighthouse, which is basically a small project. So don't go off and build like with hundreds of thousands of people, a product or service that could fail. Just get 4 or 5 people together and start trying out different potential products or services. And the ones that stick are the ones that you go ahead and start to build out.
And the successful businesses you've worked with or seen over the last while, what have they not forgo in their spend? What do they concentrate heavily on to ensure success? I know
Yeah,
not every business is the same, but what would be your kind of tier one spend, your tier two spend, and then you're kind of, that's a nice to have, but let's look at that in 6 months.
yeah, I think the companies that really are able to rise to the challenge are constantly reinventing themselves. They're constantly looking at new opportunities. They're constantly, we call it remodeling their business. So they've got a particular business model. They don't sit on that and just say, right, I'm going to keep with that forever. They start to look for new business models for their entire organization. The lazy way is, of course, just to buy other businesses. You kind of see that a lot. So that's what the big boys do, though. But it could be that if they had invested a little bit more in their own innovation management, their own value management. In other words, what I mean by that is that we see companies with hundreds of projects, but none of them are really that valuable. I mean, a lot of them are designed to keep people busy. The executives are too far away from the portfolio of work to realize that their company's working on stuff that's not really going to take them forward. So it's like we try and get them to look at that. So it's really starting to do things at a smaller scale before you go big scale, rather than we see a lot of the companies under pressure have got hundreds of people working on something that may not be successful.
And moving on then from the kind of, I know in a few businesses you see, and they're trying to create something they're not. And one thing I've always kind of the last few years learned a lot about is, be very good at what you are. And once you're very good at what you are, then look at something different. Do you think that will become the new normal for businesses of, get very good at what we are and then start looking around, or will they start looking around first and maintain?
I think it's a balance of the two. I mean, I think you have to be good at your core business for sure, but you need to be really exploring for new opportunities to continue on. So it's kind of a balance of the two. And being good at what you are also means not copying other companies, trying to be like them. There's no point in trying to be like a startup. We saw this because a lot of big companies were saying, oh yeah, we've got very agile practices. And, people can work from home and that, but that was bull. In fact, the first couple of weeks of this disruption was, IT people running around trying to get laptops for people to work at home. It was just a fallacy. I mean, there's so much that people talk about their organization being agile, but when it came down to it, they just weren't, and this is the business, right? So there's some great work done by technologists to get people working from home, but we'd already thought a lot of these companies had that infrastructure in place, but they didn't. So.
Yeah, I say if you ask many CEOs, did they do a fire test 12 months ago, or capability survey around 12 months ago? Was there was it done, or did they even think about it?
Exactly. I was a CIO of a company just a few years ago, and I won't say who it was, but I had to really convince them to put in enough infrastructure for 2,500 people to work at home. I bet they're thanking me now because we did it then, and but at the time you're often nickeled and dimed. The organizations that say, well, the likelihood of that happening is kind of low, so we don't want to invest now. But in reality, you should really trust your experts to guide you.
Yeah, I'll come back to the trust word in a minute. I was speaking to a business, a very large scale Irish well-known business, and they actually did a fire test 18 months ago. And they checked the capabilities of everybody remote working, their core business to how we can survive. And they ran through it 18 months ago. It was an actual pandemic test. And they said they learned so much of it, but it took 12 months for them to fix the problems that they found, so you can only imagine what clusters are on things at the moment and when that can get going again.
Well, IT infrastructure is seen as a cost, as rather than being valuable, and it's forced down in cost every year, trying to get 10% reduction every year. And in fact, it's something that's not invested in, and there's some really, really creaky old technology out there. It really, really is old, and it's been shown right now that it's that underinvestment's coming back to bite these companies.
Yeah, and there's a whole nother talk around underinvestment in security and all that kind of stuff that people probably went, no, I don't want to hear about it yet. Just keep working.
Exactly.
So you mentioned trust, and it's something we'll kind of finish up on. The leadership side of the new normal and how people will have to manage people going forward. Like, no, I don't think people will go back to a 5-day week in an office. I don't think offices will want people there 5 days a week. And that's going to be a big challenge for a lot of senior management in, you know, not enterprise businesses, but traditional businesses, especially in IT where, you know, they're seen as flexible, but they love seeing everybody in the office. You know, how as a leader or as a group of a leadership function, will they have to change, and how difficult do you think will it be?
I think it would be difficult because of the ingrained nature of some of this with some teams and some personalities and types of people. You know, the micromanagement side of what you're talking about and presenteeism has been around for years. And I think those leaders are struggling right now. And in fact, my business partner, Hayden Shaughnessy, and myself, we talked about this recently, where we were looking at how leaders could find new purpose in this new world, because you know, they're going to be, as you say, they won't be able to see everybody at their desks. They're going to have to trust them that they're working. But their job is going to be to lay this path to the new future, or at least get the blockers out of the way. Like I said before, they shouldn't be, you know, putting sign-off processes in place, or, you know, some of this procurement stuff that takes 3 or 4 months. I mean, if you've got organizations that are operating within those models, I mean, they're going to really struggle, you know. So trust is trust in the people, but also to be able to change some of these processes, to be able to say, right, we're going to throw that away. It was onerous. It slowed us down. It made us ponderous. That's the thing they're going to need to do. And so there is also this kind of, right, how do we get to this new world, how can we remodel our organization, and how do we do that as an invested way of working rather than seeing it as a cost? Yeah,
and do you think innovation will suffer? Because I spoke to a couple of people on this already, and they said, you know, it can still happen, you know, very easily in a remote, nearly sometimes easier on remote functions. But do you think leadership will stifle it and go, let's maintain what we're good at, or do you think it's a great opportunity for innovation to happen?
Well, I think, and again, this is where my colleague Hayden's an expert on this, but you know, it's like, innovation gets stifled because it's seen as a cost. That cost is something that, you know, the cash protection we talked about on the down curve. But if you look back in 2008, when we had a previous crisis, think about the number of startups that came out of that. And also in previous crises, the startups and the companies you're talking about are coming from those areas, and they see an opportunity where others see problems. They see opportunities, and that's what we'll see. We'll see a lot of startups filling the gaps, and eventually, you know, they might get bought up by the big companies. But it'd be far better if you were an organization yourself and you could emulate what they do, which is to, you know, actually do a small amount of testing and learning with understanding what your customers need and what they're looking for, and fill those gaps yourselves. But I do feel that cost versus value is the thing that's going to be the driver at the moment. That the cost is going to be the thing that they're going to be protecting.
Okay, brilliant. Final thing, I'll let you go after this. Top tips, or your top tip for an organization or a leader for the next 2 or 3 months. What should they focus on? If you were sitting with somebody now and you'd go, I'll come back to you in a couple of months and we'll see how you got on with this. What would your homework be for somebody or an organization?
That's a good point. We've been thinking about this a lot. So, and it's not much different to what we've been talking about for quite some time in the methodology that we work with, you know, which is with organizations, to say to them, well, you know, what is it that you're currently working on, and is it valuable to where you're going to? So it's a case of like freeing up resources and assets to work on, you know, building new stuff, remodeling your organization. So, I mean, first of all, I think that's, for me, it's getting that kind of those resources lined up to be able to work on something new. But I think it's also the fact that companies themselves, you know, there's a lot of leaders going to need to learn how to trust their individuals. They really are going to have to think about the culture of where they are right now. They're going to need to be able to communicate on a different level. They're going to have to, you know, become that group of people that remove all the blockers and issues to allow people to be free. But also they've got to make sure that people are not feeling stressed by this. You know, the thing about this cash protection and workforce reduction it does make people very nervous at home, and therefore they may not be performing as they should do to dig you out, you know. So there's going to be a lot of reinventing leaders themselves to go away from this sitting in meetings, reading reports, actually starting to be more connective, and collaborative, bring people together, make sure people are working well within your organization, be authentic, you know, really be authentic.
All right, brilliant. Thanks a mil for your time today, Finn. I will post all your contact details and the change curve on the post that we set up. But for today, Fin Goulding, founder, CIO, CTO of the Flow Academy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers. See you then.